Hi guys, I'm Darren, and in this video we're checking out a new transmitter from FrSky. This one. Okay, so I've actually been very good. I've not opened this at all myself yet, so I don't know what it's all gonna, well, I know what it's gonna look like, but yeah, I've not actually had my hands on it yet. I've been waiting to get this video sorted, and typically all the video software sort of messed up because of that. So let's take a first look at the FrSky Tandem. Right, so what we have, if you've got a more modern X9D or a Horus, you're probably used to these cases. They're really nice cases, and I don't mean that in a funny way. They're useful. They've got nice storage pockets and they hold the radios pretty well. So let's have a look, see what we got. So that's actually a surprise. I was not expecting that. So in this top pocket, which, you know, again, I was sort of referring to as being really useful, I've actually been sent the intro kit. So it's got the R9MX and an R8 Pro. I really wasn't expecting that. I was just expecting a transmitter. So thank you very much, FrSky. I'll be doing a test and review of that. And that'll come in very useful for my petrol plane. But yeah, so what do we get in this top piece? We get instructions. So it's the infinity antenna, the zip 9 antenna, get a sticker sheet. And this, I guess, will also have instructions for the actual radio itself. So yep, there's the sort of base instructions for the ETHOS system, how you charge your battery, you know, manual stuff. Now what else do we have? So this is a nice bit of protection. Make sure the radio turns up in great condition. We get a big thick leather neck strap. Now this is the same type of strap you get with the Horus, and I must admit I'm not a big fan of these types. I know people are, but I prefer the thinner ones with just a single clip. But yeah, you get a strap. What else do we get? We have USB-C connector. So that's obviously for charging and also plugging the transmitter into the computer. And we have some nice blue plastic things to go on your switches, and a little bit of fabric, which I guess is possibly to do with your strap. Who knows? Anyway, the important part, let's get the transmitter out. So yeah, you can see this is a really nice molded box. It's going to hold the transmitter and keep it in really good condition. So we've got these plastic bumpers, which are sort of optional. So they're to improve grip. They're just a sort of finished plastic. But yeah, I guess maybe that's if you're used to a thicker radio. So let's get it out of the bag. So here we have it. This is the FrSky X20S. Okay, so here's the transmitter, and I was given the option of black or blue, but to be honest, I absolutely love this blue color. From when I first saw it on the X20, I thought it was a lovely color. So we have our protectors here. Again, these are the same as on the Horus. So if you were used to those, then you know what to expect. We have gimbals, and you can see these little dots. These are actually the adjustable, rotatable gimbals. That's one of the reasons I was given the option of the X20 or the S, and I thought I'll go for the S just to see what these gimbals are all about. So yeah, I mean, feel-wise, it's very comparable to the Horus. And yeah, they are very close to the outside edge of the radio. So if I bring the Horus in, you can see, I mean, firstly the size difference of the radio, but also the distance between the edge of the gimbal and the edge of the transmitter. These are much more inbound, and I can show a measurement. So here we go. So this will be center of the stick to the outside edge. Let's go to the rubber. So you're looking at about 44 millimeters, whereas yeah, with this it's around 38 millimeters. So quite a big difference. And just to compare, so here's the trusty X9D, and let's have a look. And yeah, it's probably a lot closer to the X9D. So the X9D appears to be around 40 millimeters. I can see on the camera angle, but it doesn't look like it is. But look at the angle of the throttle stick. That's going straight up, because obviously it's sprung. It's just the angle of the camera. That is dead on the center and pretty much the outside edge. So yeah, ignore the optics. If I move it over, you'll see. So there you go. So yeah, about 40 millimeters for the Tyrannus, about 38 for the X20, and it was about 44 or something for the Horus. So you can see that they're really close. I mean, for a thumber, that just, yeah, that feels spot on. And for pinching, yeah, you can certainly, it feels more like the outside edge is a bit trickier to get to than the inside. The inside is nice and comfortable. So yeah, definitely a thumber. But yeah, the gimbals feel really nice. The last thing that we're going to take a look at is the inside. So the main thing I wanted to check out was how you actually rotate the gimbals. So there are 4 screws on the gimbal. You just undo those slightly and rotate it, do the screws back up, job done. So you can see these are obviously Hall effect gimbals, so the sensor's there. If you want to rotate the gimbal slightly, that you need to take the case apart, which in itself is actually a nice, easy job. You don't need really to do much. Take the battery out, and then it's 4 screws. Just be careful with that antenna, and sometimes the sliders will stick to the top or the back part of the case. But yeah, that's it. But yeah, so that is a quick look at the inside. The switches, actually, I mean, I've not really taken the Horus apart, but compared to the Tyrannus switches, these are a completely different level. They do look much better switches. These screws here, 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 and here, you can access through these rubber plugs. One is here, so that's the horizontals there, and the lower one is for the vertical. Sorry, it'd be the upper one on one side, the lower one on the other side is your vertical. But yeah, it would be nice if the battery or the backup battery was here or something, so it's really nice and easy to get at. But other than that, I mean, I'm not an electrical engineer, but it looks good to me. There's the ribbon cable is well attached. There's no way that's coming out. Everything else is proper wires. So there we go. That's the inside. I'm going to put it back together. Actually, have a play with it. So that last unboxing section may seem a little disjointed, and the reason for that is since then I've had a look at a couple of other first looks at the X20, and it just basically seemed like a lot of the facts weren't really put across, didn't know what they were doing, and you know, it's expected. This is a new radio, it's not OpenTX, there are things that are going to be different. So what I thought I'd do is I've taken, well, I got it Monday, it's now Sunday, so I've had it about 6 days, and I've been using it so we can actually look at things with a bit of, you know, perspective, rather than just, you know, this is a radio, I don't know what I'm doing with it, this is what it's going to be like. So one of the first things that I needed to do, and you may need to do too, is flash the firmware, which in itself, it's a different process, but it's not actually a painful process at all. So I'm now on 1.0.6, which is no longer a pre-release. This is actually release firmware. And as I've also been looking and exploring the transmitter and ETHOS, I've actually been recommending changes to the developers. And to be fair, all the changes put through from all kinds of RC pilots on the GitHub have all been looked at seriously, and a lot of them have had changes implemented. So it's a very positive experience. It does, I mean, there has been a lot of criticism about ETHOS because, you know, rightly, people love OpenTX. It is a fantastic firmware, and something new comes along and people are taken back. And I've just gone the other way. I've been, right, it's new, let's see what it can do. I'm not trying to be a salesman or a fanboy or anything like that. I just want to take it at face values with no sort of prejudices going against it. So that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm not taking it as OpenTX. I'm not thinking about anything that's gone on in the past with, you know, uh, the development of OpenTX, clone radios, none of that. I'm ignoring that all completely. I'm just looking at it as in, it's a new transmitter, it's a new firmware, what can it do? I'm looking at this the same way as I'd look at maybe a Futaba or a Jetty or a Spectrum or anything else. Just because it's not using OpenTX anymore, there's no reason just to put a load of hate on it for that reason. If it works well, what's the problem? So let's take a look at the radio. We'll go over all the switch layouts, all that sort of stuff, and then we'll have a quick look at ETHOS. Again, I'm not going to go deep into ETHOS. I've decided I'm going to do a few videos on, yeah, how to set up a model, all that sort of stuff. So if you're getting an ETHOS radio, I'll have a video for you soon. But also, it is still changing quite a lot, which some people don't like, but I actually quite like it, especially because a lot of the changes that are going in are requested by RC pilots, and that can only mean good things for the firmware. So let's head over to the workbench and we'll take a look at the transmitter. Okay, so here is the X20S, and to briefly go over the switches, because I think I may have covered it earlier, we have standard layout. So this is basically the same as an X9D, Horus, TX16S, T16, T18, all that sort of stuff. It's very similar. So we have S, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H are the switches on here. We have S1 and S2. So again, that's exactly the same as an X9D. And the detents on these are very pronounced, which is great. You know exactly where the center is, and it almost sort of locks in there. It's a really nice detent on these. We have left and right sliders. So again, exactly the same as an X9D. Up to that point here, even the trims, we have 4 trims. We don't have the extra trims like we have on a Horus or a similar radio. We do have these 6 buttons here, which on a Horus you have a 6-way rotary switch, which I absolutely love for rotary switch. What I'll get into later is these could potentially be better. But if you've got a jumper or a radio master, you'll be used to 6 push buttons along the top. However, these are slightly different. So you click one and it moves on to that particular switch. But if you click one and click it again, it actually turns the whole lot off. So you could actually use this as a 7-position switch. But there's potentially talk about making these really customizable. So it could be as it is at the moment, which is like a 7-position switch. It could be a 6-position switch. Each bank could potentially be a 3-way switch, or each button could be a 2-way switch, just on and off, or even momentary switches. I've also put forward a suggestion that it's a 6-way switch, but the first click is like a pre-selection, so you can use that to trigger a special function to say, I don't know, acro or whatever flight mode you want as an example. And then the second click will then actually activate the flight mode. So if you're flying FPV, it's, you know, you can feel where it is, but you know, it's not that natural. It's not as natural as clicks on a rotary switch, but it'd be nice if I say click this one, it says cruise, click it again, and it actually puts it in cruise. Because say I wanted to click that one, it says cruise, but actually I want waypoint mission, click that one, says waypoint mission, go to waypoint. So at the moment, yeah, 7-way switch, but potentially could be a lot more than that. So stay tuned to that. So yeah, we have basic 4-way trims. On the back, we do have 2 momentary switches. They're not configurable. Again, it's a software switch, so potentially they could be changed to 2 positions. So click once on, click one again off. But at the moment, they are just momentary. But there's a lot of potential, and it's nice to actually see that potential that pilots can see being listened to. So as far as the menu controls, again, if you've got a QX7 or a Horus, you'll be very used to this. We have a jog wheel, which personally I think is the best way of navigating menus. I always used to like the plus and minus button on the Tyrannus, but since getting my X10S, I was completely sold with this. I know Andrew Newton's a huge fan of the jog wheel as well. I hate the scroller wheels. I do have a video for the Radio Master TX16S that I need to sort of finish, but one of my biggest criticisms is that scroller wheel. They just don't work well at all. They skip, they are just horrible to use. This thing, or this concept I should say, is brilliant. I don't think this one works as well as the QX7 or the Horus. So this is the same as the QX7. So you have scroll around the outside, which is pretty solid, and just a button in the middle. And that works absolutely perfectly. Even the QX7, it's exactly the same wheel from what I can tell, and it just works fantastically. So if I could make a criticism of the hardware of this, I would just want this changed to the same one as the QX7 or Horus. This one is a little bit flimsy. It just doesn't feel as good in the hands to use, but I would take this night and day over a scroll wheel any day. There's no contest there whatsoever. We have our model, system, display and return buttons, and in the middle we have the page button. So that's pretty standard. So that's all the hardware. So what I'm going to do now is have a quick look at ETHOS. But before I do, I just wanted to share a quick tip. If you have got one of these radios, the firmware is updating quite quickly. And to get it connected via USB so you can copy files across, you need to put it in bootloader mode, which is slightly different. And actually, I think it's slightly better. I mean, on the old systems, you could hold the two trims in and then do the power. But they've actually changed it. You just hold down this button and press that button, and we're straight in bootloader. You notice I didn't hold the button down. It's just a click. When you plug in a USB, it will say USB connected up there, and you do everything on there. I'm not going to go over the flashing process. There's a nice video by FrSky for that, but I will make a video myself as well. And the other thing that confuses people is to actually get out of this screen. A lot of people will hold the button down because that's how you power down the radio, but again, it's just a click. So the bootloader stuff, just click, but to actually power the radio on, you do hold it, and to power the radio off, you do hold it. So we do get a warning screen if there's something not correct. We can set up checklists, so the switch positions, all that sort of stuff we can set up, same as we could with OpenTX. So if the throttle goes up, you can see there's another warning, and you basically just clear the warnings until they got rid of. So I've got my volume on this slider, so I'm just going to press any key. It's pretty similar at this point to OpenTX. You can set this up to have as many boxes as you want. So this is the standard sort of layout. You have the model image on one side, and then they give you 3 timers here. So what I'm going to do is just have a quick look at what menu options are available. I'm not going to dive into these because it will just make this video long. This is supposed to be an overview of the transmitter rather than ETHOS, but where ETHOS is new, I thought we'd take a brief look. So you can access all this with the button down here or using the touch screen. So along the bottom we have home, which obviously will be returning back out of everything. We have a plane, which is the model screen. We have this box here, which is the telemetry setup. So that's the same as clicking the display button. And then we have the gear cog, which is the system button. So there you go. There's also things being added. So I think if you click the battery now, you can get to the battery screen. I think if you click the clock, you can get to the clock edit screen. So that was all new in this version. There's a load of stuff going in, so you can add it. Like you can have the RSSI in actual values now. Oh, you can't click that yet. So clicking the sound button brings up sound options, and there are lots of useful little things like that being added. So let's take a look through the menus. So if we have a quick look in the model menu, a lot of things are going to be very familiar to people. So we have an edit model. which is basic details of a model. So you can give it a name, a picture, the type it is, whether it's so aeroplane, glider, helicopter, multi-rotor, or other. One thing that's new is you actually can assign control surfaces here. So you don't have to go back through a wizard for a new model to set this up. You can say, I've got, you know, one aileron, for example, instead of two. And then at the bottom, you have a reset all mixers. And what that will do is actually create a new mixer for you based on all this and set the outputs and all that. Nice and straightforward. But you'll notice that compared to OpenTX, there's a lot missing, but they're just on other pages now. So, for example, the radio settings are all on this RF system page. So one thing you'll notice is this owner registration ID. Now, don't worry about that. That's got nothing to do with FCC, CAA registration or anything like that. It's literally a unique ID for you to use when you're binding to your receivers. So it's basically a unique ID for the transmitter. And it's also quite cool. If you've got two ETHOS transmitters and you give them the same ID, you just need to rebind the receiver to the radio and it will still work. So yeah, it's basically just a unique identifier for the radio. It's nothing to do with official IDs or any of that crap. Yeah, this is where you set up your receiver. So you have ACCST, D16, access or tandem mode. So they should be fairly self-explanatory. Access we've seen before, which is the Access series receivers. ACCST we've obviously seen for a long time. And of course, newer, the IRSM modules only support D16. You can use D8 with this radio, but you just need to get an external XJT module. And TD is tandem, which actually uses both 2.4 and 900 megahertz at the same time as a redundancy system. And I'm actually going to set that up on my extra when I get a few pieces together to do that. So to do each one, you would set your receiver type, and then you can turn on the receiver or the transmitter that you want to use. So that's the 2.4. The 900 only works on access. So if we switch over to access, we now see we also have 900 megahertz option. This is the basic binding sort of area, and you'll notice all the registration and everything for access is all in the same area. It doesn't matter if it's 900 or 2.4. You just register it and bind it all in the same place. It's the same fail safes, all that sort of good stuff. So you can see both have the option for internal or external antenna. So external will actually tell you which antenna to use. So on the top you have antenna 1 and antenna 2. So antenna 2 is 900 and antenna 1 is 2.4. It would have been nice, I think, if I'd actually just labeled them 900 and 2.4. I think that would have been just a bit easier. But anyway, so that's where you can select that option. You have power levels. So at the moment, I just have the standard LBT firmware on here. So there's 25 to 500 milliwatts. With the Flex firmware, you can get 10 milliwatts to 1,000 milliwatts. So this maxes out at 1,000, which is the same as an external full-size R9M. So that's absolutely nothing to complain about. Model ID, again, unique identifier for the model. It's exactly the same as any other system. And then you can set up, obviously, the amount of channels that you want to send out. So 16 or 24, because Access supports 24 channel. And then it's just a regular registration, binding, and your failsafe. So we'll close down the internal and have a look at the external. So at the moment, we have a few options. We have XJT Lite, which will give you your D8, and LR12 if you use L9R receivers. We also have R9M Lite, R9M Access, R9M Pro, and PPM. Now, a lot of criticism, or I suppose anti-speculation, has been, will it get crossfire? And a lot of people have been saying, oh, it's not going to get crossfire, it's crap, I'm ignoring it. Crossfire and Ghost are both on the list of protocols to add. So it's not there now, but in the future it will be. That's all on the GitHub. I can put links to the issues there, but it's actually the guy who's developing this has said it is coming. Same with Lua scripts. He's got more priority on Lua scripts, which is fair enough, but that is coming. So again, this is all very familiar: failsafe, ranges, binding procedure. So that's the RF. You might be used to that in the model area. Same with the timers. That's just been moved out to a different place. Again, I'm not going to go into it in any depth. Trims. This is something that I believe will be changing quite soon. So this is just a general setup. Again, this was in the edit model, so we can set up whether the trim's disabled, the amount of trim it actually does when you move the switch. You can set extended trims, and then independent trims per flight mode is the thing that's probably going to change to make it a lot more flexible. Telemetry, again, this is the same as the telemetry screen on OpenTX. You can discover more sensors. You can go in, edit the sensors, give them different names, different units. You can choose whether it's written to the log files. It's, yeah, pretty flexible. Flight modes is basically that at the moment. So you can give it a name and you can see trims. So the independent trims per flight mode, this will just show you what it is. Again, that is something that is probably going to change in some of the newer updates to allow you to use different trims on different flight modes, also just disable them on different flight modes. There's a lot going into it, and it actually looks very positive and customizable. What I'm going to do actually is just turn that off so I don't use my battery too much. So one thing absent on the screen is the inputs. If you're used to OpenTX, obviously you're used to having inputs available where you can configure what the sticks do and combine switches, all that sort of stuff. You can still do that, but it's now in the mixer. And the reason for this is because the outputs has actually become more customizable. So we don't really need the inputs. So adding a new mix is really simple. This is on an aeroplane setup, and what mixes you can add will vary depending on what type of model you've selected. So for example, I think if you choose other, you only have free mix, VAR, trim, and possibly throttle. I can't actually remember, but yeah, this is the mixes available for airplanes. So you can see there's sort of complex mixes here, like rudder to elevator, rudder to aileron, air brakes. On the glider there is butterfly, which is also known as crow braking. All this sort of stuff is already built in and easy to access and set up, and they all come with specific things for those surfaces, which is quite handy. So for example, on the ailerons, elevator and rudder, you have rates that you can set up really quickly and easily. On the throttle, there's a throttle cut and a throttle hold, which are both things that weren't actually in OpenTX. So to add things is really simple. You just click what you want to add. It will ask you where you want to put it, and then you can start configuring it. Coming from a programming side, VAR is global variables. So it's slightly different at the moment to OpenTX. There's you can have so I'll show you. So we'll stick it after the rudders, and then we'll take a look at the global variable. So you can name it, and you can give it a weight, and you can give it a weights with a switch, and you can give it a channel to output to. So I've not really played about with this yet, but it could be that it may be something that changes in the future to expand on the functionality. I need to investigate it, but it could be that there's things missing that would make it work better, in which case we'll put a request in and I'm sure something will be addressed. Until then, let's have a look at the basic stuff. So ailerons, you can see I've set this up as a 2-channel aileron, and you can see on the chart here the 2 different sources and how they're acting. if I edit the aileron, you can see I've set up rates here. So that's on switch SE, and you can see the rates changing as I move the switch. You can set up curves, which of course could be expo or a standard or a custom curve. You can add multiple curves. You can set up differential. You can change the number of channels. So for example, if you've got a glider with 3 surfaces on each wing, you can set up 2 for aileron. And of course, then for each of those channels, you can choose which channel they output to in the outputs page. And when you select this, if it's a new mix, you can automatically give it the same name as the actual mix itself. The aileron 1 and 2 were already set up when I did the model wizard. So there's a lot of cool things that come in that. So for example, I'll show the throttle. So you can see here it's got a throttle cut, and it's actually a really nice one. So at the moment it's disarmed. If I raise the throttle, you can see it's still at -100 because the chart isn't activated. If I try to arm, it's not armed. If I lower the throttle, then it arms, and you can see it has the full range of movement on the line. So there's some really nice things, and also it's got a throttle hold, which I think I'm not really sure. I think it's more for helicopters throttle hold, which will hold it in a set position. And again, you can add weights on there. You can add curves. You can set low trim. So that means that the trim only adjusts the low end. So for internal combustion planes, that's really handy. It just sets you right for setting your idle throttle. And again, it's the channel. So that's just a couple. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can see there's enough there already to get going for most things. So if I click on the outputs, at the moment it just looks like a regular output screen. You have the orange, which is the mix signal, and the green, which is what is output to the servo. And it will give you percentages up in the corners here. In the middle, it also gives you the microseconds, so you have all the information you need. But if we click on one, so we can name it, which is the same. We can invert it here, which is a nice simple click of a button. We've got minimum and maximum subtrims, which again was OpenTX. We have the center subtrim, but we can also easily apply curves, which you could do in OpenTX, but it was sort of hidden. But we also have slow up and down, which we didn't have in OpenTX on a channel rather than on the mix. And you can see on here, if I get right across, we have 64 channels. Now obviously Access only has 24 radio channels, ACCST only has 16. So these other channels are actually going to be used so we can send things out on a channel and use it as an input, because all the inputs in the mixer can also be outputs. So we can loop things around to actually combine things within ETHOS by customizing and using the outputs. And that's sort of how the global variables work at the moment as well. So let's move to another area. So the checklist, I sort of briefly mentioned when we switch the model on, but there's things where the low throttle is, make sure that fail safe. You can actually set your pots and sliders to be in specific positions, and the same with switches. So you can choose whether they're up or down. At the moment you do have to go in to choose up, down or middle or no check. But one of the things that has been added is basically put your switches in the positions you want. Be a set all button, and then it records exactly where everything is unless you've put no check on it. So let's say things are evolving throughout. So trainer is how you set up your trainer, so you can be master or slave. So I'm going to set mine up as slave and cable because I mostly use it for a head tracker. I've not really looked deeply into this at the moment, but I will do at some point when I'll do like a head tracker video, and we'll see how this is all set up. Logic. Let's have a look at device configuration. This is for configuring external devices. So for example, you plug the RB is a redundancy bus. So if you have a redundancy bus module, you can plug that into the smart port, click that button, and it will allow you to configure that device. So these are all FrSky devices that you can configure from within this. You don't need Lua scripts to do it anymore. Right, logical switches is slightly different. I've set up 2 for this model, and they're basically for the flight timer. So it will only work when the throttle is raised and it's disarmed. And you can sort of see it's very similar. It's not all in line, which I actually really liked on OpenTX. You could see what was happening on the main screen. With this, you do have to sort of dive into the logical switch to actually see it and configure it. But the one handy thing is it does have a name, which is really, really nice, because you can, with this update, select the logical switch by name to perform commands, which is easier than just having to try and remember numbers. But you can see it's got all the standard stuff from OpenTX that you're used to. The A to B aren't there yet, but I believe it's working similar to the A to X. I think I've not really dove into this yet, but I believe the functionality is there. It's just accessed differently. But we have range, and or XOR, timer, sticky, and edge. So range is new. I've not really looked into that yet. Again, I'm not going to go into it. I'm just going to show what's available at the minute. And I can highlight this, and you can see here to activate the logical switch. This one is actually using the other logical switch, throttle raise, which if I go here, you'll see logical switch 2 is called throttle raise. So again, everything that you had in OpenTX for logical switches, you pretty much have here. It has actually got one extra. It's got 2 delays on it, where OpenTX only had the one. So you got a delay before it activates and a delay before it will deactivate, as well as a minimum duration for the switch. So that's a look at logical switches. Special functions, again, this is pretty similar. So we've got not so much stuff at the moment, and potentially that will change. And also what I've noticed is these lists change depending on what you've got set up already in your transmitter. So for example, let's just do a reset. But if I go to here for the category of what activates that special function, if I didn't have any logical switches set up, they wouldn't appear there. Also, it will work just like OpenTX. If you flick a switch, it will allow you just to put that in. And then obviously we can choose what we want to reset. So individual timer, telemetry, all timers, flight data. So there we go. Well, and finally, for the plane, we come up to curves, which again is very similar to OpenTX. You can name it, give it a type. So we can have an expo curve, function curve, or a custom curve. You can automatically smooth it. There's an easy mode, and non-easy mode is what allows you to choose the other points here. So I'll reduce that to 3 points just so we can fit everything on screen. So if you notice here, point 1 and point 3 are always going to be -100 and 100, but the middle point you can adjust. In OpenTX it was called a custom curve, but here it's easy curve. So now we can adjust where that sits in relation that way, as well as the up and down. Can you drag them there? Anyway, so that's curves. I'm just a bit mindful this video is probably going on quite a while now. So we'll take a brief look at the screen. So this is the standard screen that you get when you first get the model. So the model bitmap, but you get 3 timers. You can configure this screen, or you can add a new screen. So let's add a new screen, and you can see there's lots of different layouts that we can have. So this one has all the trims and everything, and the others are just combinations of data. So that one's going to have loads of data and widgets on it. That one's going to have sort of big widgets. So let's just stick it on flight timer. We'll just go back to the main screen. So you can just swipe across. I believe Page will do the same. So that's, yeah, I'm not going to dive too deep into that. The only thing that I will show is at the moment you'll notice that there's no full screen. That's at the moment Lua scripts aren't supported, but they are coming. And I'd imagine once they are, you'll get something there which just is the whole screen for full screen Lua scripts like the iNav script or Yapu maps. So let's have a quick look at the system menu. So model select allows you to choose which model you'd like. I believe it's all in categories. So you have airplane and other. It'd be nice, and I hope they're going to work on more categories. But as far as the basic settings go, if you click on a model, you can set it to the current, you can clone it, or you can delete it. But it gives you a little bit of information at the bottom. It gives you the actual bin file name. So this is stored on your SD card, which is all the data for the model. So if you wanted to take it off and back it up or put it on another radio, it gives you the file to use, file size, when it was modified, type, all that sort of stuff. So that's the model select. And there's also where you create a new model, you just click the plus, and this will show you the wizard. Now the wizard is actually pretty good. I'll briefly go through it, but all these do the same sort of thing. So I would choose an aeroplane, choose 1 channel for the engine, 2 channels for ailerons, so I put that on 1 channel, no flaps, traditional tail, there we go, name it, just call it C, just give it a picture, and there we go. We've created a model. If I go in here, you see the mixer's already set up with AETR model order, which is the default on this system. Outputs already set up, already named, and already correct. So it does everything really simply. And that could be a complex build like a glider with 2 ailerons per wing, 1 flap per wing, and it will automatically set all that up for you. So that was the model. We have file manager, which again is fairly simple and pretty familiar. So again, we can just use our touchscreen or go in. So we can get all like our model images. So most of these model images are actually straight from my Horus. They all seem to work fine. The only one I've added is actually that SBAC. And if you go to websites like, I think it's Sky Raccoon or something like that, I'll put a link in the description. You can actually now download ETHOS specific model images. Right, so one thing while I'm in File Manager actually is audio is slightly different on ETHOS. So if I click audio, you'll see there's an EN folder and then system. So that's very familiar. But if you wanted to add your own audio, it now just goes in the root of the audio folder. You don't need to put it in a language pack folder. And that's because they figure people who use this radios just speak a language. They don't really need to worry about what it is. Just stick your own custom audio files in there. So all your custom audio goes in the root, and then the system stuff is in EN or whatever language you speak, and system. Right, alerts. This is just checks that happen periodically. So we have silent mode check. So if you switch the radio on and you have no volume, it will pop up an alert. Checks the main battery voltage, real-time clock battery voltage, and also inactivity. So it's your inactivity alert. Date and time is pretty self-explanatory. It's where you set your clock. Display, so we can set the brightness. I mean, as you can see, this at the moment, it's bright enough for the video, and if I put it up any more, it will be too bright. But you can see where it is on the slider, it's hardly anything. So when you're outside, you'll have no problems at all seeing this in bright sunlight. Let's try and get some, that's really bad reflection. But if I turn the brightness up, even in that, which is pretty extreme, you can still see it. So let's turn it back down so it's good for the video. I think it's about there. Right, so we have other settings like when you wake up the screen. So I've just left that on auto. We've got the sleep timer, so when it will dim the LCD. You can actually have it so when this sleep activates, it actually shuts the screen off completely. But to be honest, I like leaving it on this because you can still see it. It's just that the backlight is off. So you can still actually see what's on the LCD, even with the backlight off, and it's just handy. You can set a style, so it's orange and black, white and black. I think yellow and black works the nicest at the moment. I don't know if this is something that could be customizable. I've not investigated yet. Top toolbar. So here's the bits where you can change the voltage and RSSI to digital values rather than like symbol indicators. So that's that. We've got sounds and vibration. So here you can set your language up, the volume for the audio, vibration strength, and how often everything does it. Also, the Vario is in here as well. Now, one thing I will show, when you get this, it is set like this. So this is set to value. And so you can basically adjust this. It tells you, how loud it's going to be. And what I've always found handy is to put the volume on a pot. So I always use this traditionally, but on this, I'm going to use this one here. But it wasn't really obvious where you do it. But you just long hold the enter button down, select user source, slide it, and return out. And there you go, done. So it's nice and simple. You don't need to set up special functions or anything like that. It's built in now. It's just where to access it wasn't quite obvious. And there's quite a few places where holding down this button actually does stuff as well. So what I could show you, we'll carry on with this first and then I'll show you. So battery is just your battery information. It's where you can set your voltage range and also configure the voltage with a multimeter just to get the battery level right. Hardware is where you can do a check, setting up what switches you have. So obviously if you change one of these to a two-way switch, you can change it here in the menu. The analog digital values are all there as well. It's also where you can calibrate the sticks, calibrate the gyro, because this obviously has a gyro built into it that you can use to activate things. And also a hardware check screen, which just shows the position of all the switches. Actually looks really nice. So that is the hardware screen. So finally we have sticks, which is where you can set your channel order and the mode. So you can swap it here, and then obviously you need to change it on the back. You can even rename the sticks if you prefer. So you could have like yaw rather than rudder. You can actually just rename them to what you want. And actually, while I'm here, I'll show you a long press thing. So actually, I'll show you the text editing thing, because this is actually quite useful. So I'm sure you're used to using plus or minus or a scroll wheel or a jog wheel to change the wording. And then what you may have done is long held that to change the case from upper to lower case. If you do that, you'll find that you now get a menu which has copy and clear. So yeah, you can actually just copy and paste text labels to other areas of the radio, which has actually been really useful. But if I go back into the edit, this actually does a lot more now. So system and display, you think of these of left and right. So it will actually move the cursor to where you want to edit. The button in the middle is actually a delete. So it will delete from the right hand side. The model button will change the case and returns back out. So that's a nice simple way of editing the text, but also another example of how a long press can do more stuff. We also have our wireless. So we have the internal. This actually has two internal Bluetooth. So there's the para Bluetooth module, which deals with this side of things. So you've got telemetry or trainer, that sort of thing. And also you have an audio Bluetooth module. So what I've done at the moment, I've ordered a single wireless Bluetooth earbud, which I'm going to bind to this radio. So when I'm out flying my glider, the Vario is just going off in my ear and not annoying everyone else on the flight line. So it'll actually be quite useful for that. So you just search for obviously the devices, pair it with your earpiece, and then you can have the audio from here going to your audio device. So again, it's not something that everyone will need or want, but it's a nice feature. And finally, we have system information. So this is all the information about the hardware, the software, the firmware that you're running. The internal module firmware will show up there when you enable the module. Same with the external module if it can understand it. So there's a lot of information here that's quite helpful, especially in these early stages where if you have a feature request or if you have an issue, you can go to the GitHub. If you give them the firmware information and the date, as well as the firmware type, it will help them to either add the feature or sort the problem out. So that is the brief overview of ETHOS, which I wasn't actually going to do in this video. So there's the bonus. But anyway, this video has gone on long enough. As a caveat, I've not flown anything with this yet. The light out there looks really bright, but it is absolutely hammering down with rain. And the weather conditions for the last few weekends have been terrible. But I am looking forward to setting something up and giving it a go. Because the more I use this, the more I actually quite like the feel of it. It may sound strange, but it actually feels more like an X9D than a Horus. So as far as the radio feel goes, it feels like a slightly thinner X9D. I think that's the nicest way to sort of describe it. And you know, the X90 was a great radio. But yeah, I hope you guys found this video useful. I'm not trying to sort of push anything. I just want to sort of get the facts out there so you guys can make your own informed decisions. And yeah, the one thing that I've really taken away from this first week of using it is that the actual future of ETHOS itself as a firmware looks very, very promising. There's a lot of work going on to make this tailored for how pilots want to use it, which can only really be a good thing. Whatever your sort of political views on certain companies, that's your own things that you need to sort of consider. I'm not going to push you either way. But as far as build, usability, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this radio whatsoever. It ticks all the boxes. So I'm going to look forward to actually getting out and flying it. But I hope you guys found this video useful. Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon, and that will help get this video out to more people so they can sort of learn about this radio too. I will be following up with setup guides. I've got a plane that I'm going to bind this to for testing, and we'll take it from there. But thank you very much, guys. See you on the next one.